David Cartspeed again, and today on this video we're going to talk about clutches. We're going to talk about clutch maintenance, how to adjust your clutch, and then at the very end we're going to talk about clutch performance. Now I know when you start talking about, doing work on your clutch or any kind of like maintenance or adjusting the clutch, most of everybody's reaction is,
this is crazy, this is crazy, this is crazy.
But I assure you we're going to take it step by step. I even got a professional to come on and kind of talk about clutches as well. So without any further ado,
It's showtime.
okay, so very first thing we're going to talk about is how to clean and maintain your clutch, okay? Because, not just making sure your go-kart has the right setup or your engine's fresh or you got the right tires on there or the right prep or air pressure and all of that jazz, okay? You got to make sure your clutches are well maintained and they're performing correctly, because, man, that could lose your race just as much as anything else can. Man, when that clutch comes in, you want it to lock up. And when I say lock up, you want it to lock up like Andy Dufresne at Shawshank.
Most new fish come close to madness the first night. Somebody always breaks down crying.
You get what I'm saying? So, let's start off with cleaning your clutch. I got a clutch here, and I got some gas, okay? Now, let me say this too, this is not the only way to clean and maintain your clutches. This is just how we at Cartspeed maintain ours between race events, okay? First, we got a clutch here, and to kind of speed up the video, we've already taken the basket off of it and the thrust bearing, okay? The first thing we do before we clean the clutch after a race weekend is we'll take a small steel brush that have soft steel, okay? And what we're gonna do is we're gonna come through and we're gonna lightly scrub the discs. Now, I'm not bearing down on the discs because I'm not trying to clean, I'm not trying to rub off any disc material. What I'm trying to clean is any of the dust or the clutch, the dust that comes off the discs, or any kind of sand or grit or nastiness from the track. I'm trying to get it out the pores of the disc, okay? And I go through and I clean both sides of the disc, and I flip it over and I clean this side, okay? And as you can see, when you're doing this, a lot of times you'll see the disc change color just a little bit, and you can tell that there's going to be a texture difference with the actual friction discs, okay?
Do what?
Okay, so then after we've cleaned the discs with the steel brush, then we're going to come through, and I got a Tupperware filled with gasoline, okay? I personally like to use gasoline. I feel like it's a really good cleaning agent, and it does really well with clutches. So all we're going to do is we're going to take this clutch here, we're going to kind of dip it in the gas, and then let it sit in there. And it's going to stay in there probably 10-15 minutes. Now, while our clutch is in the bath, in the gasoline bath, we're going to take a blue napkin, or a clean napkin, I don't know why I said blue, but a clean napkin, and we're going to clean off and wipe off the thrust bearing. We'll make sure there's no old lubricant or any kind of disc dust that's on the thrust bearing. Now that we've cleaned that off, we're going to clean off any kind of spacers that go between the basket and the thrust bearing. Make sure all those are cleaned off. Now, once we've cleaned them, we're going to take a little bit of petroleum jelly, okay, and just a very, very small amount, okay, and we're going to just gently dab the thrust bearing, and then we're going to work it in with our fingers, okay? You want to make sure that you don't use a whole lot, because if you put too much on there, you get any kind of oil. Once this clutch heats up in the clutch will eat itself alive, okay? And it will really affect the performance of the clutch. So I was always told, the rule of thumb is if you can see it, it's too much. All right, so now it's been a few minutes. We've had the clutch in the gasoline bath, and we're going to take it out and we're going to blow it off and make sure we get all the gas out of the clutch. All right, so now we got the clutch out of the gasoline bath, and we use compressed air to dry it off because it's important to make sure it's completely dry. So now, since we've done that, we are going to take our spring height gauge, and we're going to measure the spring height of all the springs. Now, spring height is really important because that's what will determine the stall speed of the clutch, okay? And a rule of thumb, the smaller the spring height, okay, the longer it's going to take for it to come in. The longer or taller the spring height, the quicker or less RPM is going to come in. So, if let's say your spring height is 400 thousandths, okay, and just for example, it comes in at 3,000 RPMs, okay, if you go down to 350 thousandths, it's going to come in at 3,900 RPMs. Okay, so the important thing when you're checking spring height is, one, make sure your gauge is set on 0. And you can always pop the top of it just to make sure it comes back to 0. All right? And then you want to make sure when you push it onto the clutch that you have it flat and even when you get your measurement. Now, pro tip, when you're adjusting your spring height, okay, and let's say you are backing the spring and making it larger, always end on you tightening the spring up. So let's say you're wanting to go one full turn out, okay? Well, then go one full turn plus like a quarter and then tighten it back down. The reason why that's important, because if you just back out the springs without tightening and putting tension back on the spring, you won't see any engagement change with your clutch. So it's important, let's say if you're trying to go from 300 thousandths to 350 thousandths to, remember, you might want to take it up to 360 and then back it back down to 350. All right, so now that we've covered cleaning the clutch and spring heights, now it's time to talk about air gap. And I know a lot of people, man, they get a little when you talk about air gap, but it's not that big of a deal, and I've asked a special guest to come in and explain it. Check it out.
So for the ones of y'all that don't know who I am, I'm James with Corrupt Clutches. David at Cart Speed, he asked me to do a video explaining air gap. All right, air gap is very simple. A lot of people, it kind of scares a lot of people off, but it shouldn't. It's very, very simple. 90% of the clutches, you can check air gap with the basket on. Most of them you can. There's a few that you can't. Air gap is simply the distance between the friction disc. You can check it on the drive hub side, you can check it on the pressure plate side, you can check it in the middle, doesn't matter. There's your air gap. When you get a clutch from your clutch guy or new, whatever, you're probably going to see this around 30 thousandths. We recommend here, after about 45 thousandths, after the friction disc wear, whatever, send it in, get it rebuilt. That is simply air gap. Take you a standard filler gauge, slide it right in there, see what you got. That is air gap. Thanks.
Hey, man, I appreciate that, James, man. Now, so now that James is filled you in on what air gap is and how to check it, okay? So now, let's talk about clutch performance. Because I know what y'all are thinking, Dave. You're all about data. You ain't said nothing about the data yet. Is there anything that we can do as far as using the data to help us with the clutches? I'm glad you asked that question because there is. So check this out. All right, guys. So kind of diving into the clutch performance. Most people, when they set their clutches, what they'll do is they'll put rear tires on the go-kart, have the go-kart on the stand, crank up the engine, and they'll gradually increase RPMs while their hands are on the back tire until they start feeling the clutch start pulling or the rear tire start tugging from the clutch engaging. And they'll look at their micron and they'll see kind of what RPMs are at. Well, at Cart Speed, we do a little bit different. What we'll do is when the go-kart's at the racetrack, when they go out for practice, we'll come back and we take a look at when the clutch engages when the go-kart's under load, meaning the tires are on the go-kart's on the ground, the driver's in it, and it's pulling onto the racetrack when the actual clutch engages. And we do that through Race Studios and through the laptop, okay? So what you're looking at here, all the way to your far left is your GPS, where the go-kart is sitting on the track. To your right, the upper graph is mile per hour, and the lower graph is RPMs, okay? So check this out. When the driver gives it gas, you can see the RPMs come up to about 3,200, 3,255. And the clutch engages, okay? And as you can see here, the go-kart starts moving, because once that happens, now we're at 0.3 mile an hour, okay? So this long section here where the RPMs are horizontal is what they call being on the clutch, okay? Now, the main the general rule of thumb, okay, is when the clutch locks up, you don't want it to bog the engine. Okay, when the clutch engages, you want the engine to continue to increase RPM. Okay, while it's pulling the go kart forward. All right, if it bogs or loses RPMs, then that means that it's going to make you have a lazy start or a very sluggish start. Okay, so let's take a look and measure that. All right, so we identified that the clutch is coming in at 3,200 RPMs. We're going to measure this real quick. From 3,200, we gained, while it was on the clutch, 100 RPMs. All right, and that's pretty good, because that means that when the clutch engaged, the engine didn't bog down, it continued to pull forward. And that right there is what separates an okay start to a great start. When that driver hits that gas, you want that clutch to lock up, engage, and the engine immediately start pulling. Okay, if the clutch locks up and all of a sudden you see the RPMs right here start dipping down really bad, and then it starts increasing RPMs, that's not good. And what you want to think about doing is lowering the engagement RPM of the clutch. That way, so you're more into the torque band of the engine.
Oh, snap!
Okay, so another thing that we like to look at to judge clutch performance is, how do we know once the clutch locks up if it's slipping throughout a whole lap? How do we know if it's completely locked up down the straightaway versus when the go-kart goes in the turn and it gets under load, is it slipping? Because sometimes, when you don't have any kind of forward drive up off the turn or forward bite, a lot of times you think, oh man, I got bad tires, or I have the wrong setup. Sometimes it ends up being a bad clutch, because what happens is the go-kart goes into the turn, gets up underneath the load, and when there's that tension there, the clutch gives up and fails and starts slipping. Then when the go-kart gets down the straightaway and it unloads where there's not as much tension, the clutch then locks back up and starts pulling down the straightaway. So what we're looking at right here is we're looking at an actual speed sensor, and it's overlaid on top of the RPM trace, okay? And this is one lap. So all the way over here to your left is a start and finish line, and then all the way over here on the graph to your right, again, is a start and finish line, all right? And as you can see, in theory, an increase in RPM should increase axle speed, right? Decrease of RPM should decrease axle speed, okay? Because RPM is nothing more than a measurement of crank speed, okay? So, and as you can see here, these two graphs mirror each other extremely well. Like you're seeing every time the RPM goes up, you're getting an increase in axle speed. Oh, by the way, the axle is purple and the RPM is red. So as you can see, every time the RPM goes up, the axle speed increases. Now there's a couple spots like here on the exit of turn 2 where they separate just a little bit, not much though, and you can see just a little bit at the entrance of turn 1. They start separating just a little bit as well. So all in all, this clutch is performing really well. But that's another way we can actually judge how the clutch is doing, how it's doing under load, to make sure you're getting the very most out of your clutch. All right, guys. Well, man, in this video, we've gone through how to clean the clutch, how to check your spring heights and air gap, and then we've also looked at how we can check the clutch's performance through race data. Guys, I appreciate you joining me with this video, and guys, remember, race is tough. Don't be leaving no speed at the trailer.